She was gently bathing the unconscious billionaire when, suddenly, his eyes fluttered open. Without a word, he kissed her, and on the spot, he proposed. Welcome, dear viewers. I'm your storyteller, James, and I trust you're doing wonderfully today. May your heart be light, your mind at ease, and may love find its way to you, no matter where life has placed you at this moment. Before we begin, let me whisper a prayer for you. May your days be filled with warmth, your nights with comfort, and may the love you give always return to you in the most beautiful, unexpected ways. For love, oh love, is the only magic that needs no tricks. It's raw, real, and when it finds you, it transforms everything. Stay with me till the very end, because today's story is a whirlwind of emotions, full of tenderness, passion, and heartwarming moments you won't want to miss. Don't forget to subscribe for more love-filled stories just for you. Now let's dive into the tale. She was bathing the comatose billionaire, tending to him as though he was already her responsibility. Then, with no warning, he woke, kissed her, and in that moment, he proposed. Adam Kingsley was a man whose name echoed in boardrooms, whose ambition built empires. He moved through life like a storm, commanding attention wherever he went. As a billionaire, he wore tailored suits and wielded power that could shape entire industries. His presence was enough to make cities bend to his will, and his name was whispered with reverence by those who only dreamed of living the life he led. But then, everything changed. His world came to a screeching halt one rainy night when metal collided with metal, a flash of lights and the screeching of tires followed by the horrific crash of his SUV. Fate, cruel and unforgiving, took its toll. His car spun out of control, and when the wreckage was finally cleared, the man who had once moved mountains lay motionless, a faint pulse the only sign of life, his eyes closed to the world. The sirens wailed through the storm as emergency responders worked frantically to save him. Yet no amount of wealth could fix a body shattered by such a brutal crash, nor could it revive a mind trapped in a coma. The hospital room he was taken to was filled with the beeping of machines, the sterile air thick with the weight of uncertainty. His family, powerful yet broken by the sight of their once invincible patriarch, now so helpless, gathered around him, unsure of what to do. Doctors spoke grimly about his prognosis. No brain activity, a minimal response, in a future filled with dread. But Adam's mother refused to pull the plug, unwilling to give up on him. His brother demanded privacy, and his legal team worked behind closed doors to protect the man who had once ruled the world. They needed someone gentle, someone discreet to watch over him. That person was Sandy. Sandy wasn't just another nurse. She was a quiet force in the room, her presence almost ethereal. She had skin kissed by sunlight, hair cascading in wild curls, and an aura that calmed the storm around her. She wasn't moved by Adam's wealth or the prestige that came with his name. Instead, she saw him as a man, someone who was suffering, someone who needed her care not as a billionaire, but as a human being. She moved with purpose, her touch tender, reverent, like she was caring for something fragile. The moment her fingers brushed against his skin, Adam's soul, though encased in a coma, felt it. Sandy didn't rush. She moved with care, wiping away the remnants of trauma from his face, speaking softly to him even though there was no indication he could hear. Her voice was like honey, soothing and calming, filling the sterile room with warmth. The world outside the hospital room continued to spin. His family fought over his legacy, his company, his name. But inside that quiet room, time seemed to stretch. Slow, and for the first time in days, Adam's chest moved in a rhythm, not dictated by machines, but by a deeper, more intentional force. She didn't notice the small twitch of his finger at first. Focused on her task, her heart ached for him, not as a powerful businessman, but as a man lost in a world he couldn't reach. And as she continued to care for him, she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow Adam was aware of her, even if his body couldn't respond. Doctors were skeptical. They saw flat brain scans, minimal responses, and dismissed any idea that he could hear or feel. But Sandy wasn't a scientist. She was a believer in the unseen. Every time her hands touched him, every time she whispered to him, She swore she felt a spark, a faint but undeniable pulse, just for her. And so, day after day, she returned to him, never missing a shift, always bringing her warmth. Her touch was deliberate and tender, her voice a balm against the harsh beeping of the machines. Sandy began to tell him about her life, about her dreams, about her childhood, things she never shared with anyone. She began to weave herself into the silence of the room, unknowingly becoming a part of his world. Meanwhile, Adam, lost in the depths of his coma, heard her, not through his ears, but through his essence. At first, her voice was a distant murmur, but as days passed, it became clearer, louder, and more familiar. Sandy's presence, her words became the only thing that tethered him to the world he had once ruled. Slowly, very slowly, something within him began to stir. One stormy night, when lightning cracked the sky, Sandy stood beside his bed, humming a lullaby. In that brief flicker of blackout, Adam's finger twitched once more, stronger this time. Though she didn't see it, Sandy felt a shift in the air, a subtle change, a stirring of something deep within the man who lay motionless before her. And so, it began. With each gentle touch, with each whispered word, the impossible became possible. Adam, though still trapped in his coma, was waking up, not with his eyes or his words, but with his soul. He could feel her. He could feel her presence. And in the silence, in the stillness of his mind, he began to fall in love with her, a love that transcended his unconscious state, a love that was already real, already alive, before he ever woke. Sandy, unaware of the depth of his feelings, continued to care for him with the same tenderness. She whispered to him, shared her dreams with him, and though she never admitted it aloud, she was already falling in love with the man she thought couldn't hear her. What she didn't know was that Adam had already heard everything. He had already fallen for her, even before he could open his eyes. Presence surrounded him like a warm, soft light. The way her hands had gently moved over him, the tender whispers, the care she poured into every action, all of it stitched him back together, thread by thread. His soul, still tethered to the shadows, reached out for her, longing to return to the world where her love had already breathed life back into him. As Sandy slept beside him, her head resting against his shoulder, Adam's heart beat stronger, as though it had found its rhythm again, pulsing with her unspoken love. It was a quiet battle, a war fought not in the world of sound, but in the depths of his mind. And in those silent hours, he fought to wake, not just for himself, but for her, the woman who had planted herself so deeply in his heart without even knowing it. In the stillness of the room, the machines hummed quietly, their soft beeping a subtle reminder that time was passing, that moments were slipping away. But inside Adam, time felt suspended, like a breath held just before release, waiting for the moment when he could finally speak, when he could finally tell Sandy what he had known in the silence. You saved me. He had felt the shift. He had felt the pull of her presence each day, each moment she had spent with him, talking to him, caring for him. And in the deep recesses of his coma, he had gathered strength from her love, from the unwavering belief she had in him, even when his body lay still. But now, with every passing second, the distance between them shrank. The invisible thread that connected them, woven from unspoken emotions and shared moments, tightened, pulling him closer to the surface. The silence that had once felt suffocating now felt like the space between heartbeats, fragile, but full of possibility. Sandy stirred in her sleep, and Adam, his mind now sharper, watched her face, the soft lines of her features illuminated by the pale moonlight streaming through the window. He wanted to reach out, to touch her the way she had touched him. He wanted to kiss her forehead, to show her that everything she had done had not been in vain. But his body was still not his own, trapped in a shell that refused to move. His spirit, though, was more alive than ever. And with each breath she took beside him, each whisper of her voice, he drew closer to the edge, closer to breaking free. He was fighting his way back to her, back to the world she had created for him in the silence between their words. As dawn broke, painting the room with soft light, Adam felt it. a tremor deep within his chest, like the first rumble of thunder before a storm. He reached for it, the strength, the will to move, to speak, to finally break free of the silence that had held him captive for so long. And as Sandy awoke, her eyes fluttering open to the soft glow of the morning light, she felt it too. The air had shifted. The energy in the room had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. And deep in her heart, she knew it was the moment she had been waiting for. Adam was coming back to her, and as her fingers brushed against his, a soft warmth began to spread through her hand. The unmistakable sensation of his touch, steady and real. She held on tighter, her breath catching in her throat as the world around her seemed to stand still. "Adam," she whispered, her voice trembling with hope, with fear. And this time, just this time, the world inside Adam's silent prison cracked open a little further. Her heart surged forward before her body could catch up. It was as if the universe itself held its breath in that fleeting moment, the room filled with an unspoken promise, a love so undeniable it could no longer be ignored. The tension that had once wrapped itself around them like the very air in this hospital room, thick with uncertainty, silent prayers, and unanswered questions, now gave way to something new, something real. Sandy felt the tears brimming at the edges of her eyes, but they weren't from fear or from sorrow. No, these tears were the culmination of everything she had ever hoped for, everything she had poured into this man. Adam had awakened not just from a coma, but from the deep fog of loneliness and despair that had held him captive for so long. And now he was here, asking for forever, asking for her in a way that stripped away all the pretenses, all the walls. His voice, though weak, was full of strength, full of love. The words, "Will you marry me?" rang in her ears, soft yet thunderous, and she saw everything that had led them to this point. The silent nights, the whispered confessions, the laughter shared when no one else was around. The moments where she thought she might lose him, but never stopped believing. He was here. He was real. He was hers. With a shaky breath, she stepped closer to him, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached for his hand, still trembling but stronger now, her fingertips brushing his palm as if confirming that this moment wasn't a dream. The world outside seemed to vanish, leaving just the two of them, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, a future they hadn't dared imagine. "Adam," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. Forever." A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the room, but in that moment there was only the two of them. The love that had carried them both through the darkest days now glowing brighter than the morning light spilling through the window. And when their lips met, it was like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. A kiss filled with all the promises they had yet to speak. A kiss that had been waiting for this very moment. The machines around them beeped, but it was nothing compared to the symphony of their hearts. Sandy leaned in, her body trembling with the weight of their shared love. And as Adam kissed her, it felt like the beginning of everything. Their story had only just begun. Chosen a man who can't even walk yet, who is still so broken. How can you be so sure? Sandy stood her ground, her heart beating in time with the power of her words. She had no more hesitation, no more fear of the unknown. "I'm not being emotional, Mom. I'm being real. Adam may not be perfect, but neither am I. And when we're together, it's like nothing else matters. It's not about his coma or the expectations of your world. It's about us, about what we fought through together, even when he didn't know who I was. That's what love is, and it's real." For a moment, there was only silence. Sandy could feel the weight of her mother's gaze, searching her face for some sign of doubt, some indication that this was all just a fleeting fantasy. But there was none. Sandy was certain. Adam, standing beside her, his presence solid and unwavering, added quietly, "Sandy's right. This isn't about the past. It's about the future we're building, no matter how many obstacles we have to face." His hand gently squeezed Sandy's, a silent promise that they would face them together. Her mother's eyes flickered between Adam and Sandy. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight this impossible choice, but she seemed to lose some of her steam. It was clear that the force of Sandy's words, the depth of the love between them, was wearing her down. "You're sure?" Her voice cracked just a little, betraying the walls she had spent years building. Sandy nodded, the tears in her eyes now a sign of her unshakable certainty. "Yes, Mom, I'm sure." And just like that, the room felt different. The air, thick with tension and judgment, seemed to shift. Sandy's mother, who had always been the picture of control and expectation, stood there momentarily at a loss. But as she looked at her daughter, standing strong and resolute, something in her softened. Adam, still holding her hand, looked back at her mother. "We'll make this work, Sandy and I. You don't have to agree, but I hope someday you'll understand." The silence that followed was filled with the heavy weight of unspoken emotions. Sandy's heart raced, but this time not with fear. It was anticipation, hope for what could be, despite the challenges ahead. Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment it seemed like she might turn and walk away. But instead she exhaled slowly, a deep, reluctant breath. "I hope you know what you're doing, Sandy. I truly do." Her eyes softened just for a second, and then, with a final glance at Adam, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the silence she left behind. Sandy let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The weight of the moment finally lifted, but the battle was far from over. Adam turned to her, his gaze filled with affection. "You were incredible. I'm so proud of you." Sandy smiled through the tears, her heart full in a way she couldn't quite explain. "I had to be. For us." And in that moment, everything shifted. They had fought for their love, and they had won. But they both knew that the fight wasn't over. There were still battles to come. But no matter what, they would face them together. The world might not understand, but they didn't need the world's approval. They had each other, and that was enough. The room, once filled with the weight of judgment and expectation, now felt lighter, as if the air itself was ready to let them breathe freely. Sandy leaned into Adam, her heart racing with a new kind of excitement, a kind of peace that only came when you knew you had found your person. And Adam, with all his strength, held her close, ready to face whatever came next, as long as she was by his side. And so in the midst of the chaos and uncertainty, they stood there, two souls defiant against the world, bound by love. And it was enough. Sandy had always been emotional, but this wasn't how decisions were supposed to be made, not with hearts pounding and tears threatening to fall. "This isn't how life works," her mother said, her voice sharp with conviction. "You can't build a future on fleeting passion. There's more to life than that." Sandy's throat tightened. The weight of her mother's expectations settled over her like a cloak she could never quite shake off. But beside her, Adam stood steady, her anchor in the storm. His presence grounded her, reminded her that what they had wasn't impulsive or imagined. It was real. They were real. "I know what I'm doing," Sandy said quietly, though her voice carried a new firmness, trembling with restrained emotion. "And it's not just passion, it's love. The kind that lasts, the kind that runs deeper than what anyone else can see." The room stilled. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Her heart thundered in her chest as her mother's gaze bore into her, lips pressed tight, holding back words sharp enough to dismantle dreams. "You're making a mistake," her mother finally said, voice soft but laced with warning. "You think it's love, but it's a moment. It won't be enough. It never is." Adam stepped forward, jaw set, eyes blazing with certainty. "You're wrong," he said calmly but with undeniable force. "Love is everything, and if you can't see that, I'm sorry. But Sandy and I, we'll be just fine. We're building a life, one that's ours, one that's worth more than money, power, or approval." Sandy's chest swelled, her heart rising in sync with his words. In that moment, she knew nothing could break them. Not her mother's disapproval, not his family's doubts. What they shared had already survived the impossible. This love had endured silence, fear, and loss. It had bloomed in darkness and come out stronger in the light. She turned to her mother. the woman whose approval she'd once needed more than air. But now, she saw the truth. "This is real, Mom," Sandy said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I know you want what's best for me, but this isn't some whim. I've never been more certain of anything." Her mother opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, but Sandy pressed on. "I've seen what it's like to lose everything, and none of it matters without love. Without him." Adam's hand tightened around hers. She turned to him, saw that soft smile, the one that had pulled her back to life. "I can't promise you perfection," she continued, voice softer now, "but I can promise that I will choose him, every time." For a moment, her mother's expression remained unreadable. Then, just barely, her features softened. "I don't know if I'll ever truly approve," her mother said finally, her voice laced with reluctant sadness. "But I can't deny you look happier than you have in years." It wasn't quite approval, but it was something, enough to make Sandy's breath hitch with hope. "That's all I've ever wanted," she whispered, "to be happy, to be myself." Adam wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. In that embrace, the world faded. Nothing could reach them now. "We're going to be okay," he whispered into her ear, his voice warm and full of promise. "We've already built something beautiful. No one can take that from us, not even your mother." Sandy smiled through tears, her heart light and full. The room still crackled with tension, but it no longer mattered. She had made her choice. "I love you," she whispered to Adam, her voice rich with emotion. He leaned in, brushing her lips with his. "And I love you," he murmured. "Forever, Sandy. Always." The ceremony had ended, but the moment lingered like golden petals falling from the sky. In Adam's arms, she felt the world tilt, just slightly into perfect alignment. She was his, he was hers, and nothing else mattered. As they stepped into their private suite, the flicker of candlelight and scent of roses surrounded them. It was quiet, sacred. The world beyond those doors no longer existed. Adam turned to her, eyes smoldering. "You ready?" "I've never been more ready," Sandy breathed. The soft click of the door behind them was the only sound before silence settled once more, thick with promise. Adam took a step closer, his gaze devouring her. "You're everything to me, Sandy. You always have been. You saved me." Tears filled her eyes. "You made me believe in forever." He kissed her then, tender at first, reverent, until that kiss deepened, igniting everything between them. Every touch, every whispered word was full of awe. Their love, tested by pain, now unfolded with grace. As he undressed her, his touch worshipped every inch of her, peeling away layers not just of fabric, but of past wounds and fears. They were stripped down to their truths, naked in every way. When their bodies finally joined, it was a communion, a promise. Not just passion, but devotion. A sacred rhythm shared between two souls that had chosen each other. And that night, they didn't just make love, they became love. Their love was unbreakable. And as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, the world outside seemed to fade into nothing. This was their beginning. Sandy knew, without a shred of doubt, that whatever came next, they would face it together. Always. In the days following their wedding, the honeymoon suite became their sanctuary, an intimate haven of peace, laughter, and growing affection. Sandy and Adam reveled in the joy of their new life as husband and wife. Every moment deepened their bond. But even within the cocoon of their love, shadows from Adam's past lingered. He couldn't completely silence the weight of the life he had left behind. The empire, the high-stakes business, the family ties that brought both power and pain. For so long he'd been silent, locked inside his own mind. Now that he was free, the world felt raw, exposed. And in the quiet of the night, with Sandy asleep in his arms, his thoughts wandered. He wasn't used to imagining the future. But now, with her by his side, it felt possible. Anything felt within reach. Yet with that hope came responsibility. He had faced death, come back from the edge. And the life he once knew, its politics and ambition, no longer fit the man he was becoming. Sandy deserved more. She deserved something real, something grounded. And Adam was beginning to feel that his obsession with wealth and power was no longer the compass of his soul. But still, a piece of him hesitated, a part that couldn't quite let go of what he'd built. That inner voice whispered doubts, feeding old fears. Still, the love between him and Sandy was undeniable. More than love, it was salvation. She had become the center of his world, the one who tethered him to the present. Her presence healed him in ways no doctor ever could. He watched her sleep, her breath soft and steady, and felt a longing so intense it almost frightened him. Every moment apart from her felt wasted. Once he had been a man who controlled everything, his empire, his destiny. Now he was a man who didn't know how to live without the woman who held his heart. One morning, Sandy stirred to find Adam gazing at her, his eyes heavy with emotion. "What's on your mind?" she murmured, her voice still drowsy. "I'm trying to figure out what I need to do to deserve you," Adam said, his voice low and trembling. "You've given me everything, and I feel like I'm still not enough." Sandy's heart twisted. She reached for him, brushing her fingers along the stubble on his jaw. "You don't have to do anything to deserve me," she whispered. "You already have. Adam, you saved me. You showed me love I never dreamed of. That's everything I've ever wanted." His gaze softened, but the vulnerability in his eyes remained. He gripped her hand. "I'm scared," he confessed. "Scared I'll never be enough for you, that I'll always be chasing something." She understood. The weight of ambition, the echo of past lives, they had a way of pulling you back. But this love was different. It wasn't about what they could give. It was about who they were together. "You don't have to chase anything," she said, tears brimming. "Everything you need is right here, with me." Adam nodded slowly, as if the truth of her words had finally broken through. "With you," he repeated. "With you, I finally feel complete." She kissed him, soft, slow, full of all the passion and peace they had found in each other. But when they pulled apart, Sandy noticed the uncertainty in his eyes again. "What is it?" she asked gently. "I don't know how to let go of everything," he admitted. "The business, the legacy, it's all I've ever known." Sandy took his hand in both of hers. "You don't have to give it all up, but you do have to choose what matters most, the empire or the life we're building." His eyes locked onto hers. "I know. It's just hard." "You're not letting go," she whispered. "You're making space for something better, something real." Emotion filled his eyes. "And you're everything I never knew I needed." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm ready, Adam. I'm ready to face everything with you." He pulled her into a kiss, one that wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. "Then let's build something even greater than I ever dreamed," he said. "Together." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Their love blossomed beyond anything either had imagined. The mansion, once echoing with the clamor of business, now radiated peace, laughter, and warmth. Adam's world had shifted entirely. No longer driven by ambition, his heart beat for Sandy and the future they were creating. And as that future unfolded, they dreamed of more. They wanted a family. When Sandy discovered she was pregnant, it felt like destiny. The moment she told him, Adam's eyes filled with tears. Joy poured from him as he held her tight, overcome by the realization that their love had created something new, something eternal. Sandy's pregnancy was a journey they embraced together. Adam was present for everything: doctor's appointments, cravings, late-night talks. He pampered her, protected her, and marveled at the life growing inside her. With each passing day, the bond between them deepened. Adam would talk to the baby through Sandy's belly, whispering dreams, promises, and declarations of love. And when the time finally came, when Sandy went into labor, he never left her side. Hours passed, pain and strength intertwined, and then, miracle. Their daughter was born. Tiny, perfect, radiant. "She's perfect," Sandy whispered through tears. Adam, speechless, kissed her forehead. "She's our miracle." They named her Miracle, a symbol of everything they had overcome, of the love that had carried them through darkness into light. In the days that followed, they couldn't stop staring at her, Her tiny fingers, her quiet coos, her breath against their skin. It was love in its purest form. Of course, there were sleepless nights, moments of exhaustion, and new challenges. But none of it mattered, because they faced it all, together. Years passed, and their love only grew. They raised Miracle in a world full of laughter, stories, and dreams. They traveled, they learned, they built a life that pulsed with joy. And through it all, Adam never forgot the truth. He had been given a second chance. And with Sandy and their daughter, he had found everything he'd ever been searching for. Their love wasn't just a story, it was a legacy, a forever kind of love.